Thank you. That's right. Under God. I love that song. And I have to tell you, Phil Tilley introduced me to it. He sang it at a meeting of Tea Party leaders here in Winston-Salem probably about 6 months ago. And I went out and checked out the Booth Brothers. And it's just a stirring, inspirational song for me. And it made me think that in a land where our currency carries the words, "In God we trust," our Pledge of Allegiance says, "Under God," why are we having to fight for religious liberty? Why is it even a topic of discussion? For those who are really pushing to take those words, "In God we trust," off of our currency, the only legitimate justification I can find for doing so is that for a growing number of Americans, it is a lie. But not you here today. And so I personally thank each of you for taking time out of your busy lives to set aside and come out and stand up for the one thing that keeps us free as a nation, and that is the living God. Now, we get on Facebook, we go into chat rooms, we get into all the arguments about separation of church and state and whether or not there even is a creator. And I will acknowledge, yes, we have the right in this country to even deny that there is a creator. But I also learned something at my granddaddy's knee a long time ago. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Stop and think about it. There are a lot of people who are depending on science these days. But folks, science can only tell you how things are. They can't tell you how it's supposed to be. That's where the religious culture of this country has played the key role in moving us forward in ways that no other country in any other continent, in any other century on this earth in the history of mankind has been able to do. Because the founding fathers took a risk. They didn't go out and buy an insurance policy. They got on a boat with what they could carry. They came across the ocean and they built the greatest republic the world has ever seen. And they did it with the blessing of God. They gave him the praise and the glory for what they did. And when they wrote the Declaration of Independence, they made sure that it mentioned him. But why mention God at all? Because, folks, he's the source of our unalienable rights. And yes, the atheists and the agnostics enjoy those rights as well. But I truly believe we enjoy them on a whole different level, because we understand the true value behind those rights. What is it that makes the individual so unique and sovereign in this country? Why is it we put so much priority on the individual person? It's because of our unique and singular relationship that we each have with our Creator. We need to be free to pursue our relationship with God in the manner that we best deem fit. Government doesn't tell us how to do that. That's not their role. Now, there's some inconvenient facts in history. But I know when I was born, I didn't get to choose to be an American any more than I got to choose who my parents were. And American history is full of facts. And I know those facts get in the way of some of the liberal arguments from time to time. But George Washington, the first president, stood up after he had served 2 terms in office under this new Constitution, this radical idea that defined a government based on the Declaration of Independence, which defined us as a people to the world as a godly nation, and said in his farewell address that it was foolish to govern this country without God and the Bible. John Adams, who followed him in office, made the statement that the Constitution of the United States was suitable only for a moral and a religious people. And that makes perfect sense to me. Why? because moral and religious people are self-regulating and self-governing. They have very little need of formal government. Now, I've traveled the state. I've met with over 170. I know that there are over 170 different Tea Party and conservative groups across the state that meet on a regular basis that are active. And that's the remarkable thing. It's us. It's we the people, the individuals that matter. We let politicians and government and agencies and regulations try to convince us all that they matter. And they do, but only to the extent we benefit from it. Because that's the whole purpose of being an American, is to benefit from the American experience. I had the pleasure a couple months ago of attending a similar rally over in Walkertown. And I heard our next speaker, Congresswoman Virginia Foxx, speak. And it really impressed me that day because she recounted something that I was not aware of. When you go into the House of Representatives in Washington, into the chambers, it is known as the People's House, and surrounding the walls are photographs of great leaders throughout our history. And each one is in profile, except for the portrait of Moses, who is shown in full face over the main entrance. Dare we say that is coincidence? Is it coincidence that the Ten Commandments are inscribed into the stone of our Supreme Court building? Is it coincidence that in any courtroom in this country, you walk in and the bailiff begins, oh yes, oh yes, oh yes, God save the United States and this honorable court, that has his Bible sitting on the bench of that court? Why? Because ultimately our own system of justice is based on those founding Judeo-Christian principles. That is the framework on which we can all agree. Folks, I'm not worried about Christians agreeing with Jews on that, because I can tell you right now, Christians can't agree among themselves. Would that be the Catholics or the Protestants? What worries me are people who misuse religion. Because I believe this is all tying into Obamacare, the real reason why we're here. But Obamacare is a symptom, it's not the disease. I am a direct descendant of George Whitefield. I don't know if you ever heard of him, but he was a colonial minister who traveled predominantly throughout the South as an evangelical preacher, going from area to area. And regrettably, he preached in favor of slavery. His rationale was that the conditions of servitude here in the colonies were far better and an improvement over what they experienced in the plains of Africa. Now, I admit that there's a certain level of logic to that, and that is where we go astray. Obamacare has a great moral argument for it, because it is great to help our fellow man, it is great to be charitable, it is noble to be benevolent, but it is not the function of government. Period. There's a story out on the web, many of you have heard the name of Davy Crockett, frontiersman. He became a United States Senator, and there was a fire in Georgetown in the dead of winter that put many families out of their homes and left them with nothing but the clothes on their backs. And immediately they put up a bill to appropriate $20,000 to provide relief to these families. The bill did not pass, but when he got back home to his district, he found people just turning their nose at him. One in particular, a gentleman by the name of Horatio Bunce, proceeded to explain to him he asked him, where in the Constitution is government authorized to appropriate money for charity? And we all know it's not in there. But is that what we think about? When we as an American people say, Obamacare, yeah, everybody's going to get insurance, that's great for them. But how about those of us who have to pay for it? Where do we get a benefit? We get a benefit when our tax dollars fund defense, the police, the fire department, such things as that. I understand the Center for Disease Control. We all have an interest in controlling epidemics and communicable diseases. But where does somebody else's general health become the business of the federal government? The minute you give them the authority to be the solution, they get the power to control all the effects, things bearing on that. This is the slippery slope we're going down in this country. They want to tell our kids what they can eat in schools, to the extent now they want to put cameras over trash cans to see which kids are throwing away the food and not eating it. And our 2 grandchildren go to a church-run daycare. It is against the law in North Carolina to give those children chocolate milk. That's ridiculous. You know, and this is the whole attitude that we are fighting, is that people, well-intentioned, learned people, reasoned people, are using that very reasoning and that appeal to pervert our Constitution. It says what it says. In the 16th Amendment, there's one sentence. It says, Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived. Where does Congress get the authority to levy any other kind of tax? I can't find it. But we've allowed them to do it and get away with it. When I spoke here 6 months ago, we were in the midst of the primary season. We didn't know what direction we were going in, but now the candidates, the slates have been defined, the race is on, and early voting has started. Folks, this is your opportunity to vet your candidates. But we have to start right now looking at 2 years from now, because there's some people we're getting ready to send to Congress that may not share our feelings. We hope they'll go up there and do well, and I think they're more inclined to, because one, they know we're watching. We have got to look amongst our communities and find our leaders. Who are the real leaders? It's not always the person at the top. I learned that in the military. Audie Murphy was a leader when he was a private. Leadership is getting people to do things, to willingly cooperate, to do what needs to be done. Effective leadership is doing it with the humility to keep it from becoming a selfish endeavor. Career politicians don't qualify. How can they say that it's no longer a selfish endeavor? There may be one or two, but they are rare. And I agree, when somebody goes to Washington and does well, we should keep them there right up until they lose sight of why they're really there, and that is to serve as our employee. And when we go to the ballot box and cast that vote, that is our message to them. I wrestled with what to say today. I had written about a 12-page speech and whatnot and wound up throwing it in the trash can. Because I've learned, too, that try as I may, those words never work. I've always feel better getting up and standing and saying what's on my heart. Because I can look out there and I can look into your eyes and I can see that we agree on much of what I say. Folks, it is that agreement amongst us from which we derive our greater power. And I encourage you to support your neighbor, the person standing beside you. If you don't know them, introduce yourself. Shake your hand. We are all a part of this. When the Tea Party groups and stuff start arguing back and forth, there's the Second Amendment groups, the pro-life groups, the illegal immigration groups and stuff. There are people in those groups, if you don't want to talk about their issue, they don't even want to have the conversation. And folks, it's killing us. We have an Army, a Navy, an Air Force, and a Marine Corps, and we all fight the war, and they all do something different, but they're all important, and it takes all of them doing their job to win. So we've got to quit this colloquialism amongst the groups. We can find reason for division every day, but we have to change our mental process, our focus, and start looking for reasons for unity, because at the end of the day, we're all Americans, equal under that same Constitution. Have that respect for your neighbor, show that respect, but be worthy of that respect from your fellow person. So I mentioned Virginia Fox. MC's going to come back up and give her a formal introduction. But I want to set that stage because when people like her go to Washington, you know, I'll candidly say I don't agree with every vote she's made, but I know in her heart that she's there for the right reasons and she's trying to do the right thing for North Carolina. And I think if I had gone up there, I'm sure nobody would be agreeing with me 100%, nor would any of you. Because we can always, again, find that reason for disagreement. But let's look for the reasons for agreement, because that's where we're going to grab the best of America that will push us forward. Thank you very much.